From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. Today on the podcast, we're talking with Jordan Green, founder of Farm Builder and one of the sharpest minds in practical, scalable livestock farming. Jordan's been a longtime advocate for systems that work with nature and the market, and his Cull cow program is a perfect example. Most people know Jordan about his pig grazing and hog grazing operations. I've always been really interested with Jordan's Cull cow operation, and with cattle prices reaching all-time highs right now, a lot of grass farmers are wondering if there's still an opportunity in this market. Jordan's approach flips the script, and instead of chasing top dollar calves, he trades up by buying undervalued cull cows, grazing them for a season and turning them into serious beef, even the occasional bonus calf. Instead of chasing top dollar calves, he trades up by buying undervalued cull cows, grazing them for a season and turning them into serious beef, along with the occasional bonus calf that they give him. So we're going to dig into how this system works, whether it still pencils out today, and what lessons every grass farmer can take away from the sell-buy mindset. All right, we're joined with Jordan Green. Jordan is the owner and founder of Farm Builder. Jordan is well known for his pastured pork and hog operations. That's what he talked about at the EcoAg conference this past year, and I think that's what you've written about in the past. But I've actually been following you for a long time, and I'm real interested in your cull cow operation. I know in our previous podcast we've talked about a little bit of your cattle operation, but I think right now with the prices where they're at, and trying to find a good deal anywhere you can, I'm leaning towards starting to do these cull cow sales and seeing if we can replicate what you've done at your operations. So. Welcome, Jordan. Maybe give folks a little bit of an introduction in case they haven't listened to the other podcast we did, and then let's chat about some cattle.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me back. Founded J&L Green Farm in 2009 with my wife, Laura. We are a direct-to-retail livestock business, so everything that we sell is either going to another farm as a piglet or going to the end consumer as pork chops or, chicken thighs or ground beef. Collaborate with other farms in the area to add different products to our product line, and been doing it for 16 years now.
Yeah, I think you are, Acres was founded on the idea that we talk about economics a lot, and you're one of the rare folks who actually talk about what you're doing on the land, but then after that, and truly, opening up some of the economics and giving folks an idea of different markets they can get into. Where do you get this economic background and just the interest in financial strategies?
Yeah, I think when you start something with no money, it's kind of the focus of what you're doing is how to make money. Leaving my parents' little homestead and going to Polyface in 2001 when I started my apprenticeship there, I think I had about $150 in my pocket to my name. So probably growing up in a family business and mowing lawns as a kid and shoveling snow, you intuitively learn how to run a P&L, even though you don't have anything on paper. All right, well, I got to have my gas. I got to service the mower every now and then. I got to sharpen the blades, and I need to cover my costs on all that. And I think a lot of the regenerative farm space, the focus on let's say soil health and animal health and plant cycles is the pendulum swing away from the commodity industry, which has been driven by nothing but numbers, to the point where the last inefficiency of the production to be eliminated for this, ultimately dialed in global economic, perfection, the last thing that needs to be eliminated is the farmer himself. Yeah, if we can get rid of that and then just have some AI robots doing all the work, we'll be great. that a lot of what's in the movement, the regenerative movement today, is a rejection of that mindset, and it's swung so far the other way that we kind of forgot that economics need to play a role in this, and that we can do both at the same time. You can heal the planet and make money doing it. It's not a binary where we have to choose one or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you were to give the conventional guys, one thing that they're good at is knowing their numbers and, making money. They're dealing with such small margins they can't afford to make a mistake on them. And,
Absolutely.
I'm guilty of this as well, where, especially in livestock production, I do it every time I put a new bale of hay out, or I'll put like a group of bales out. In my mind, I'm like, what if I just said there's only like 4 instead of 5 that I just put out? And it's easy to just like, you spent this money here, spent this money there, and you kind of just forget it when you start doing the math at the end. But it is, this is going to be the game, especially now with livestock the way it is. We have to be really strict on our numbers. So getting into the call cow side of things, I think the first reaction, I would have, and probably a lot of people who are selling direct to consumer, or selling these, fats at the end, is meat quality. Can these call cows get to the point where your customers are happy with the meat quality?
Absolutely, if you're willing to call a spade a spade. About 30% of the cull cows that we finish are not steak quality. They're fine for ground beef, but there's, the loins are just not there, and it's a 12, 15-year-old mama cow that had a hard life somewhere, and she's not going to recover that body condition. And where the mistake is made is, if we were to say, well, we got to have steak, so we're going to cut it into steak, and you end up with a New York strip that's like an inch and a half thick, or tall, and absolute garbage. So you got to be willing to take that $30 a pound steak and throw it into the ground beef, where it'll be perfectly fine. So you can't sacrifice the quality standard of the cut you're looking for, um, just to put volume through, or to get the maximum recovery out of every animal. But something that Alan Nation said a long time ago was, if you can figure out how to make money on the trim of an animal, so on the ground beef or on the sausage, you've got it figured out. The steak, the pork chops, the high end stuff will follow behind that, if you can solve the low end and make money that way. Which, the great advantage of a direct to retail business is, when you have with a grass fed operation, keep your inputs very low cost, we can make money on ground beef. So if every one of those cull cows ends up as ground beef, well, I'm not going to have steak for my customers, but we'll have a lot of ground beef and we'll still make money on it.
Yeah. What's been the process of getting that ground beef market? Do you have customers that are just buying like 200 pounds of ground beef at a time, or, because it is when you look at the carnivore folks, or the health side of people, they're looking for the lean ground beef. So that would almost fit better than a nice fat, really nice marbled steak animal.
Yeah, it's something that I've noticed talking to farmers around the country, is the individual, or the localized context of what people are buying for beef. In some places, talking to guys, they're always sold out of steak and they never have enough ground. Our experience was always the inverse of that, that we were always low on ground and roasts, and selling steak was what we had to work at. Probably the demographic that we're selling into, a lot of 30 and 40-year-old people with a bunch of kids, they're raising a family, so you're not looking to feed everyone New York strip 3 times a week. You just need meatloaf and taco meat, and more ground stuff. So our experience as we went along was, we needed 1 to 2 animals worth of ground product for every one of steak. So it dovetailed really well for us that if we're sending 30% of these cull cows to grind only, well, that's great, because that solves another problem that we have, that we need more ground product. So for folks who are dialed into a high-end steak market, maybe it's not a model that would work that great for them. But for us, it was a fantastic solution to a marketing need or a sales need that we were experiencing from the demographic that we were marketing to.
Yeah, and marketing is communication. I think I can take a lesson from this too, because it's always easy to market, and you always stick the picture of the ribeye or the T-bone on the marketing material. But if you just, I think what we probably should do is we should just say, we're the people that have the ground beef, because it is like if you can get rid of your ground beef, everything else will fall in line. And as long as you always have the ground beef, if people are looking for it, folks are going to buy the steaks. And it's such a, the steaks are such a small percentage of the animal anyways.
Yeah, and we get some on the beef, especially on the pork side of things. A lot of positive feedback from our customers on the quality of that ground product because we are putting whole muscle groups into grind. It's not just the trim at the end or with the pigs, just a handful of trim cuts and a bunch of fat. Customers have come back repeatedly and said, hey, what we really like about your sausage is the flavor is amazing, but when we put it in the pan, it's not half the size when we take it out and we're dumping out a couple cups worth of grease. That comes from putting muscle groups into grind, striving for a higher end ground product. And the mindset forever has been is that your ground product is like the lowest of low. That is literally the trim. It's the tidbits you can't do anything else with, so we just grind them up. The American palate has changed. Hamburgers and ground product is the most consumed beef, not the high end stuff. People are eating burgers, they're eating, Mexican food, they're taking to go stuff that's all derived from ground product, not from muscle cuts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you inspect the animals? Do you send them in? Do you know that they're going to be a ground animal before you send them in, or do you inspect the carcass?
I have a pretty good idea when we're in the corral which ones are not going to be worth messing with cutting. So when we send our cut instructions to the processor, we'll say, hey, number 47, 33, 24, grind only. But we also rely on their judgment of looking at the carcasses. And that requires a relationship with your processor to give them um, give them a say in what's going to happen with that carcass by having that conversation with them. Hey, look at these carcasses when they're on the rail or when you start cutting them. If any of them don't look up to what you would consider, a good standard for a grass finished carcass, call us. And if it's going to be a problem, we'll just throw it into trim.
Yeah. So how did this call search or call hunt that you do, how did it begin? Did you always have this idea? I mean, obviously you working with Joel in the past, he's always, trying to find angles to uh, you know, not spend as much and make a little bit more. Where did you get the original idea from this?
So the original idea arose from realizing how a business makes money is through capital cycles. That every time a pool of capital rotates through your business, you are associating a profit margin with that capital. Then it becomes a process of, all right, how do we shorten that capital cycle? Because would you rather make a 10% margin on your capital once per year or a 20% margin every 3 years? And once you understand how, it's basically just the laws of compounding interest. Compounding interest is about cycles. So most producers and what we were doing in the beginning is buying stocker animals, stocker steers, raising them out for a year, 18 months, and then harvesting them. Not many farms in our area are doing a complete cow calf through finish just because of the limitations we have on ground. It's super expensive. So you have to prioritize the acreage and the grass you have into finishing stock. So that's what we were doing for a while. Went through a school that is originated from the Bud Williams mindset or philosophy of sell buy versus buy sell, and their marketing program that in any cattle market, whether it's a rising or falling market, there's always going to be an overvalued class of animals on the market, and there's always going to be an undervalued class of animals, meaning there is a particular class of animals that you should not buy, you should be selling, and there will be a class that you should be buying and raising out on your farm. With a direct to retail side of a business, cull cows have always been the most undervalued class of animals out there because they have no value to any part of the cattle production chain except for the very end. The only people who are buying pound cows at the stock sale is Tyson and JBS, and Cargill. And you can tell those three guys are sitting up there. They probably had a little chat before about how many each of them needed and what price they're going to set. But at our local stock sale, if you go there when the feeder calves are being sold, there's 200 people sitting in there. If you wait to the end when they're selling those pound cows, there's 3 guys there. And so naturally it's going to be undervalued because there's no competition at buying. So applying the same production mindset of, hey, we're going to buy an animal, we're going to raise it for a year. That's what our customers expect. That's what we have told them is, hey, we buy animals, we raise them for a year, we harvest them, and then we sell them to you. Well, let's now look at what is the most profitable class to buy. Is it that 600-700 pound stocker calf, or is it this 1,200 pound old cow? And every time that we've run the numbers, that 1,200 pound old cow outperforms that 700 pound stocker on profitability, hands down. And so that's what led us into doing that. We started it the first year with maybe 10 just to see how it was going to go and still buying in the stockers. And the next year did more and kind of figured out how to address the quality issues with older animals and manage them because they're a little bit different than stocker calves. And then it got to the point where we're like, why are we even buying these 700 pound calves anymore? We're spending for the price of what we're buying one of them for. We can buy 2 of these old cows and they're already grown. They've already put on all that bone structure somewhere else. All we need to do is put compensatory gain on them on our farm. They'll thrive on lower quality forage, worse conditions. They don't like, they're not in a hurry to run away anywhere. So for us, it was a slam dunk once we figured out kind of the operational nuts and bolts of how it works. And then looking at the numbers, it was like, this totally makes sense. Why are we doing anything else?
Where do you source the animals that you want to make sure are going to be steak quality? Is that coming just directly from your cows?
Yeah. So once we're doing an all-in, all-out type of program where in the fall and early winter is typically when we're buying in the vast majority of these old cows. And then we will hold them over the winter, graze them through the next season, and then slaughter them. So that's one of the, let's say riskier sides of it is you're sitting at the stock sale and the pound cows are coming through at the end of the sale. So everyone's tired. They've already been there like 12, 14 hours that day and they just want to get home. So they're running these things through and you got like 20 seconds to look at them, and they're gone. And, I certainly bought some dingers back in the day, some real scrubs, and had to learn, this is what I'm looking for. And you got to sit on your hands if it's not that particular animal. It's about 15%, 10 to 15% of the cows that are coming through that part of the sale are what we're looking for. We've been able to develop relationships, though, with cow-calf guys around us where now when they sort through their herds or they have a cow that had a stillbirth or something like that and they just want to get rid of her, they'll call me first because I'm going to pay them better than the stock sale will. And, I'm much easier to work with. So about half of what we buy right now is coming from cow-calf producers right around us. And about half is still coming from the stockyard.
How do you work reasonability into the private treaties? My issue is it seems like every person I talk to that wants to do a private sale sees the prices from the stock sales. They probably aren't actively going to them. So they see the top prices because, most stockyards don't show what, 70% of the actual sales where they show the top numbers. So then they always expect they want that top number in a private sale, even though I'd argue, be like, all right, well, just tell me where you're sending them, then and I'll go there and see if I can bid on them, because I know how it is. You can go send them there, and it's a flip of the coin. They could even right now, when we're at a stockyard, even today where prices are insane, there's groups that go through. I'm like, geez, they actually just sold pretty low compared to, that guy is probably pissed off. He probably thought he was going to get that $4 a pound thing for 500 pounders.
Yeah.
Um,
So, yeah, a couple things there. One, you are not going to unconvince someone who thinks they've got the next American Wagyu in their pasture. You're not going to unconvince them. So, if that's their mindset, I'll be like, I'm not going to argue with them. And fortunately, the guys that we've worked with are generational cattle guys. Like they know
yeah,
what they've got. I know what they've got. We've all sat at the sale and watched what's going through. And so, right now I can look at a, black baldy cow that's, maybe 8 years old, 10 years old, had a stillbirth or, has an udder issue or something like that. And we can both stand there and be like, that's $1.20 cow. That's what it's going for right now. And they know that. I know that. Where they're going to make money is they're not paying that 3 to 5% commission by taking and the journey to
right.
take it up there. It's an hour away to the sale, which is really inefficient if you just got one or two cows. So I just work with people who get it, who aren't going to play goofy games and think that their exotic breed is somehow worth twice what the market is. Life's kind of too short for that, but it is interesting, that you mentioning that how many folks in the cattle industry are in a way addicted to the gamble of the stock sale as opposed to the certainty of a solid offer in their corral. That, even with calves, you can be like, look at a group and be like, all right, hey, I'll give you $3.50 a pound for these calves. And they're like, well, I don't know, let's take them to sale and see what happens. And they take them to the sale and they sell for 325.
But even if
But
they sold for 350, you're making less. Like,
yeah, or even 350 or even 375. But
yeah,
I almost wonder if it's a bit of the uncertainty of the stock sale gives you an emotional pass on the responsibility for your operation. So if I don't know what I'm going to get paid for these animals, then I have a little bit of permission to complain about the whole thing.
yeah,
If I take my calves up to the sale and I get 350 a pound, but my profitability, for me to be profitable, it needed to be 375. Well, then I can say it's the damn cattle markets is why my farm isn't making any money.
yeah. The guy behind the door is messing with everything.
Right. That it's that other guy's fault instead of looking in the mirror and saying, "Hey, I need to make 375 a pound on these calves to make money. What am I going to do to make sure I can market them for that amount?" So
Yeah,
it's almost a little bit of a little bit of the avoiding responsibility for your actions, and it is what it is.
yeah, yeah. It's. Hmm. So what is your target? Are you buying call cows still right now, or you're already past that because that was the winter and fall?
So right now we will buy them from the cow calf guys that we work with because what they have right now is spring calving going on. Like one of them is my neighbor right across the street from me, and he had a cow drop two twin stillbirths the other day, and so I'm sure I'll get that cow, in the next couple of weeks when they sort through. So from them, if they call and be like, "Hey, I got two cows, I got three, come look at them," yeah, I'm gonna do that, and we'll add them into the herd. But the bulk of what we're buying is in November and December.
Yeah. And then what is your target? You mentioned $1.20 right now. Or is that what your target is for, say, a 1,200 pound
I mean,
animal?
the market is what the market is.
Yeah.
Um, when we started doing this, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we were getting good quality pound cows for high 40s, maybe low 50s, and COVID just kind of tossed all of that, and just the shortage of cattle in the United States has really elevated that price. So I know that for this buying season, so like from last November to right now, 120 is fair for what we're looking for. It might be 150 this fall. It could slide back down below $1. I don't really see that happening. So we do have to ride the market because the neighbor who is used to selling at the stock sale, if I'm buying 8 Cull cows from him, it's not like we're going to have some kind of contract where we're locking in a price and all that. This is a very informal handshake kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I got to respect what the market will pay him. But I know that we're going to make money even if I'm having to pay, 120 a pound for a pound cow. And if it gets to the point where that's not making money, well, that's when we have to make an adjustment on what we're charging at retail. Then ultimately, the price has to be conveyed to the consumer at the end of the day. So that's what it is right now. Is just riding the market.
What's your hard cost on a call cow for a year? How much hay, anything else you give them that ties into their
Yeah.
overhead?
So with cull animals, it's really more of a cost of keep number than a cost of gain. And we're
Yeah.
right at about $1.25 a day average. So it's running us about, what would that be, $550 to $600 to keep her for the year.
And are you hitting them with anything when you get them to help them kind of, if they're not the healthiest animals in the world, do you have any sort of protocol that when they arrive on your farm, you do this to them?
Definitely. So everything gets wormed before they come here. What's nice about up at the stock sale is relationships are everything. So, got a relationship with those guys that when we're buying, they'll put them in, separate, in their own pen like they would for any buyer, but then they'll let us run them through their head gate there at the stock sale and work them so we can retag them. We'll worm everything and then we'll bring them home and then we put them in a jail paddock for the first 1 to 2 weeks. So it's like a 2 acre area where we'll have them on hay. Might be some grass there depending on the time of year, and we're gonna watch them for 2 weeks. And if any of those cows looks like is going to be a problem, either she's wild, just didn't catch that when she came through that the tail's in the air and she's ready to go places, or just a kind of injury that they're not going to recover from. There's dragging a hip or some kind of problem going on. Anything that does not give positive vibes is going back to the sale the next week. It doesn't matter what we lose on that animal. It's not worth trying to hold a cow that's going downhill for a year. You're going to be putting it in the compost pile. So have a very aggressive recycle policy that they're just going to go back to the stock sale. The guys that we buy from around us, kind of the same thing, that when they sort, they'll have the cows that they want me to come look at. I'll come over and look at them. We'll discuss it, pick out which ones, if any, or all of them. And then we'll worm them, bring them back to the farm. Same thing in the jail cell for 2 weeks. Because we also need to train them to electric fence. Everyone runs a little bit different setup on their farm. So in the jail cell, we'll have a single strand of wire, make sure they're good with that before we turn them out with the herd. Now, the nicer thing about being an all in, all out type of approach is usually in the fall, we are building up an entirely new herd. Even if we have some left from that previous year, we'll run them as 2 separate groups till Group A is completely slaughtered, while we're building up Group B.
Yeah. What is your jail cell like? Do you have like woven wire around those 2 acres with a single hot wire?
Yeah, it's basically that side of our farm. The barn is right up on the road. So we have our corral. We actually park the truck on the road to load out of our corral. And so we'll dump them in there. It's woven wire with barbed wire on top. Has a lot of tree cover on both sides. It kind of sits in a little valley. So a lot of cows are shy when you buy them. They're not around people a lot. Most cow calf guys do not actively manage their cows on a daily basis. The cows see them in the spring, and they see them in the fall, and then they see the tractor every day during the winter to get hay and silage. So we have to familiarize the cows to being around people, start training them to move, and it's a little bit of a process to settle them down. And sometimes a couple cows, they'll offload and they stand in the trees for 3 days and they don't want to come out, but eventually they will. So
Yeah. So when you talk about what you're looking for, 10 to 15% of the animals, do you want to go through, some of the key characteristics that you're looking for in those animals? Hey there. Did you attend our EcoAg conference this year in Madison, Wisconsin? Well, if you didn't, or if you did, we've got the recordings now available. Get on-demand access to every session with the EcoAg recordings. Learn directly from the pioneers of soil health, livestock integration, and profitable regenerative systems, all at your own pace. Speakers include Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, John Kempf, Joel Salatin, and a lot more. We also have additional products that include the full-day workshops done by Matt Powers, John Kempf, Nigel Palmer, Jordan Green, Mark Shepard, and Austin Unruh. These workshops are in depth and will help you dig deep on the presenters' topics. Grab your recordings now at conference.eco-ag.com/24 recordings or find the link in the notes. Because the best investment you can make is in your own knowledge. Now back to the show.
the real easy thing right off the top is weight. I don't want anything over 1,300 pounds. Ideally, I love an 1,100 pound cow that has that kind of grass phenotype, of being pretty big barreled, shorter cow, short little legs. That comes through not often, but if it is, that's what I'm going to try to go for. It doesn't make sense to buy anything over 1,300 pounds. They're already super fleshed out. They're going to have a lot of fat on them, especially you get up. It's amazing the amount of cows that are coming through sales now that are like 1,800 pounds. These things are just huge. They're way overfed. They've been overfed for a long time. They have a massive frame on them. That's not what we want for a grass finishing program. We want something that's 1,000 pounds to 1,300 pounds, ideally on the lower end of that range. And then so that's an easy one to see because when it runs in, that pops up on the TV there behind the auctioneer. And if it's above 1,500, I'm not even looking. Just it doesn't matter what it is. I'm not buying it. But if it's in that weight range, then you have to make that real quick assessment of, looking at its face, trying to see if you can see what's going on with its teeth, looking at hooves really fast, looking at tail, looking at its legs. Just looking at its eyes, seeing if there's anything that you can deduce in those 15 seconds that you have. The other thing I'm really looking for, though, is I don't want wild cows. Like if she comes in and she's trying to run those wranglers over and jumping up on the side of the corral and just acting a fool, no, not for me. I want an old cow that has some gas in the tank, generally is in decent health, and is kind of chill. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. When you say you're looking at, what are you looking at for the hooves so they don't have any, kind of curled?
Yeah. So what you'll see is usually one toe will have a real bad curl on it, which, if you have the right facilities, you can trim it and try to address that. We just don't. The other thing that you have to look for is really swollen hocks above the hoof, which would indicate like an infection in the hoof. Like sometimes you will see the top of the pastern there right above the hoof actually broken open and like pus oozing out of it and stuff. Her hoof is shot. It's just not worth messing with. She needs to go to Taco Bell.
Tail?
Tail. So the length of the tail can tell you age. How long that hair is. So if some farmers, what they'll do when they run cows through every year is they'll actually cut the hair on their tails to keep it a uniform length, so you can't tell. But if you see one that has a tail that's almost to the ground, that's a really old cow. She's had a lot of life in her. Primarily what I'm looking for, though, is it a clean tail? So if it's a tail that's just like totally covered with poop, has a poop ball on it, that means her digestive system is not great. Probably a lot of grain in her diet. There's not that it's a no, but you just know you're going to have some metabolic reconditioning to do with that cow. But if it's a clean tail, she's got a clean butt, that more than likely her rumen is functioning properly. She doesn't have a lot of metabolic issues going on.
Yeah. Uh, what is the calf situation? So I'm sure I know you mentioned a lot of these animals will actually drop a surprise calf for you. What
Yeah,
are they mainly coming from the sales barn? Obviously something that put out a stillborn isn't going to give you a calf, but
right. I mean, we get calves from the sale barn ones. We get them from the local guys I buy from here. It basically just comes back to cow calf guys are not preg checking cows before they get rid of them,
yeah,
and they're not paying to have them preg checked when they get to the sale. Why they're not, that's beyond me. But year in and year out, about 45% of the pound cows that we're buying will birth a calf while they're here. We've already got a handful of them running around right now, and that does, there's a couple things that come into play when she drops a calf. One, she's not getting slaughtered that year. She has a calf, so we are going to hold her over through that next winter unless there's something really wrong with her. Um, the calves, though, usually will pay for the cow. So we will wean those calves pretty early. Right around 400 pounds is when we're going to wean them off. And right now, we just cycle them back through the stock sale. We've tried to see if grass producers who are buying stockers want to buy these calves, but they're so inconsistent and kind of all over the board. Of you got a Charolais here, you got a Hereford, you got some kind of mutt cross. You got all. There's no such thing as a uniform group of these calves. So selling to grass finished guys who are buying light calves hasn't worked out. So that's why we send them back to the stock sale.
yeah. And you probably, yeah, you would feel a little bit nervous to sell someone an animal like that, and
Yeah, I
you
have
know,
no idea what it is.
yeah,
This is a Heinz 57 calf right here.
it's a
Um,
$4 a pound calf.
you'd be surprised, man. I mean,
I'm sure.
we were selling some four weights last fall that were running like $1,200-$1,300 a head, and
Yeah.
well, that's nice because I bought the mom for about that much money, and she gave me this calf that paid for her.
Well, it is, especially when they're light like that. We see it in our area a lot with Holsteins. All the dairy guys are breeding Angus to their Holstein herds. And
Yeah.
it's pretty difficult to distinguish when they're 300, 400 pounds. And if they don't have those white spots on them and they're nice and black, like they're going for that price.
Well, if you look, I'm not a commercial cattle guy, so my knowledge of their industry is observational. But one of the issues that the Packers are having is overly conditioned animals coming from the feedlots, and this overage of fat off of these carcasses, and what are they going to do with it? Well, this Angus over Holstein really helps with that. That you can have this leaner finished animal that you can cut with the fat off of your other ones. And that was a big area where that Mexican cattle were backfilling, is bringing in lean Mexican cattle to mix together with all of this surplus fat from animals finished at American feedlots. And my suspicion is that the beef industry is really behind a lot of this push to bring beef tallow back. I don't know if you have seen that kind of in the food zeitgeist right now, that seed oils are bad, so we need to get rid of them now, and tallow needs to make a comeback. Well, it seems very conveniently coincidental to me that you have a beef industry that has a big problem with too much beef fat, that now they have a nice market outlet for all that fat. Yes, we're back. Tallow's back. You need to put tallow in those deep fryers. It's a product that they need to move, and they figured out a way to get behind something and add a little bit more profitability.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for it. I would assume it's better than seed oils, but
Oh, I'm
I
not
would,
saying
I
it's
wonder, I
a
would wonder
bad
what
thing.
steak. I would wonder what the fat is that is it Steak and Shake is the big one that's doing it,
I
or
think so. Yeah.
yeah, I would be curious of the quality of fat that they're using.
Yeah, I assume there is quite a stark nutritional difference between tallow from a grass finished animal to one that's a corn finished feedlot animal.
Yeah. So I'm assuming. I don't know. Are there a lot of people interested in this, or am I like the only person that? Because I remember one of your. I think I watched a YouTube video of yours like 3 or 4 years ago, and I've just been like kind of obsessed with it. I haven't pulled the trigger myself. I've bought open cows before, and they worked out well. But are
It's
you getting a lot of people that are interested in this?
a lot of people are interested in it. I don't know how many people are pulling the trigger on doing it, because
Yeah.
what makes it work is we retail the beef. And so immediately that excludes a lot of cattle farmers that they're not retailing beef. They're just wholesaling, they're commodity selling it. I know of some guys that have tried it to then recycle them back to the commodity sale, and they lost their ass on it. Because the reason that it's the undervalued class of animals is because the market demand for it is so constricted. Only a few players in the market actually are buying that animal. Nobody else can do anything with it. Your backgrounders can't do anything. Your feedlots can't do anything with it. No stocker guy is going to want to buy that animal. So that's what suppresses the price. Even in this elevated cattle market, the pound cow price is still a suppressed price relative to the other classes. So it only seems to work if you have a way to retail the beef. Now, I'm willing to bet someone who really knows, has great infrastructure on their farm, knows their stuff with beef. You could buy these animals in, bring them back to the farm, preg check them real quick, and the ones that are pregnant, keep those, recycle the other ones right back to the sale. The next week, maybe you lose $50 a head on that transaction, but you basically just bought yourself bred cows at a discount.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I
that's
think of in our area, there's, like there's specific sales barns that do fat call sales, and I'm assuming you're buying at just the normal weekly, call sale or cattle sale. So there could be something where you take it from a sales barn, get some better condition on it, because supposedly these call cows at these fat sales are going for like 2,500 or
right.
a lot.
Yeah, there's multiple ways that you could value add to those animals. That you could let it drop the calf, and if it's a decent condition one, you're selling it back as a cow calf pair, or you're breeding them back, you're selling it as a 3-in-1 kind of deal. Um, that requires an owner or a manager of that operation to be very engaged in what's going on. And the vibe for especially a lot of producers in our area is these are part-time operations. They have full-time jobs elsewhere. They're doing this on the weekend, and it needs to be relatively a low thought process that's going on the farm. We've got the mama cows. We buy a new bull every 2 years. We collect the calves in the fall. We take them to the stock sale. We pay the taxes, and Grandpa's farm stays on for another year. Is kind
Yeah.
of the mindset. Guys who are
Well,
really
and these guys, the guys that have had these herds, they're making more than they could ever have dreamed of by
right
just,
now, especially, yeah.
yeah.
So why change something that's winning for you right now? And which is fine, but for us, we want a winning formula that works every year, and that is why we have done it.
Hey, eco farmers. This is Taylor Henry with Acres U.S.A. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out, the Acres U.S.A. membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres U.S.A. magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres U.S.A., but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes. Yeah. Well, my next question was going to be, what mistakes have you seen from people who have said they've tried it, but we've kind of covered those, you know.
Yeah, trying to recycle it back through the stock sale. You know, there might be some money to be made there on 90-day grazing and, you know, putting on a couple 100 pounds of gain on these old cows. But if you're not really dialed in on what you're looking at and buying, if you run a 5% mortality on that group of old cows, well, then your margin probably just went out the window. So being very disciplined is probably one of the most essential things, that you really can't be putting a lot of these things in the compost pile and expect to make money off of it.
Yeah. So one question I've been asking everyone I've been interviewing lately is, you know, I see a lot of people on LinkedIn and X that they're publishing their projected P&Ls for, say, planting an acre of corn or soy or some type of commodity, and essentially all of them are just in the negative. What would you do if you're in that position? I know you're not in the commodity world, but
yeah. One of the things that was taught at this Bud Williams school is how you are managing 3 different pots of resources. That you have feed, you have animals, and you have land. And looking at which one is the overvalued class and which one is the undervalued class. Same thing as you would looking at all the different weight categories of cattle. And so if you look at, say, the commodity market right now, what is the most overvalued class? Well, it's either going to be the real estate or the animals right now, right? The most undervalued class is going to be the feed. You know, corn guys are staring down the barrel of $4 corn this year, which when we started our farm in 2009, they weren't making money on $4 corn. So I don't know how they're going to expect to make money in 2025. But yet they will all do it. So, you know, what I would do is, if I was in that position, is have a very hard look at those 3 areas. What's the overvalued? What's the undervalued? And what is going to be the action to build into the future for the farm? You know, I'm not saying you need to sell the farmland, even though that might be what some people have to do. But what actions can you take where you are not engaged in the undervalued area, or you're engaging it as minimally as possible and focusing on your efforts in those overvalued areas? So every farm's going to be incredibly unique to their context of what they have to do. But I wouldn't see a scenario for me and our farm this year where I would want to plant an acre of corn expecting to sell it into the commodity market and make money. You know, if I was going to plant grains, I would be looking for ways to value add that. Can we, you know, it's a fantastic year to raise pigs. Corn is, you know, is really cheap. Can we raise pigs and make some money that way? Can you do some kind of specialty cropping where, you know, different crops that are holding a higher value than just producing dent corn, you know, yet again? So, you know, they don't have an answer. I'm not going to have a better answer for them, except an observation, just, you know, general observations of any time we as farm owners, we are business managers. And anytime as a manager, when you have that metaphorical, all those eggs are in one basket, you are elevating the risk to the business of failure. That if you have a bad crop year, yeah, the USDA might come and subsidize everything and bail you out. But, you know, basically they just band-aided your year. Are you going to do it again the next year, and again the next year, and again the next year? Or can we take a step back and look at our farm businesses through that scope of, hey, I am an asset manager. I need to mitigate risk. And the best way to mitigate risk is to explore diversity. So maybe we need to do something a little bit different than having everything in one basket and we're all in on corn and beans, or we're all in on backgrounding calves or owning big poultry houses. It's good to have some diversity of what's going on so that the enterprises that are profitable, if you get caught in a bad year, they will sustain things while you figure out what's going on in the other area. And that's something that happened to us several years ago. We got caught in a year where we way overproduced piglets. And so we had to, fortunately, everything else held it all together because we had to dump a lot of piglets that year just to get rid of them. And that enterprise was unprofitable. But because we had, retail sales, because we had beef, because we had poultry, we had forestry, we had all this other stuff going on, it wasn't the end of the business.
Yeah. I'd like to see some of those guys, and I know it's easy for me to say, but I think most people that run a lot of crop ground probably have a herd of cattle. I'd love to see some annual cover crop planting, grazing it during the growing season. And if you do plant corn, like I'd like to see the economics behind, if the corn prices are where they're at the end of the year, what would it look like if you just grazed it?
Yeah.
Through the winter.
Yeah. I mean, if you're losing a couple $100 planting corn or beans, well, just about anything else is going to be a better proposition.
Yeah.
The problem is you get caught in this cycle of, well, you got to make payments on the equipment, you got to make payments on the property, and you've got all this debt tied up into it, and the only the only kind of P&L that the bank is going to want to look at, or the USDA is going to look at, is, well, we did corn and it did 180 bushels an acre, but somehow we still lost our shirt. The entire it's not just us farmers on the ground that need to have a reformation of thought. It is the entire system. Like, why will a farm credit give you $5 million to plant $4 corn, but they won't give you $500,000 to build a value add facility on your farm to make ready to eat food? And so, the entire paradigm is what needs to be overhauled and be looked at. Of the reason crops are overproduced in the United States is intentional. And as farmers, we keep participating in that. But also the entire system that we are trying to exist in perpetuates that overproduction.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Jordan, we'll let you get going. I'm sure you guys are busy right now. What are the activities on the farm?
So we're in the spring push of everything. Took the cow herds off hay this week, so they're in daily, every other day movements now. Birds are out on pasture. A lot of piglets going on. So it's the spring push out for us.
Yeah, you're ahead of us. I wish I could have some spring warmth.
It'll get to you.
Yeah. Are you guys? Did you guys get hit with a lot of rain at all, or
No.
are you?
Nope.
You dry?
That was all west of us. Yeah, I would say we're not dry, but we're not saturated either. We're kind of in an area right now where it could be a drought year or it could be fine. Kind of walking across the top of that fence board right now.
Yeah. You guys have an event in the fall. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is our 8th or 9th Farrow to Finish in Marketing School. We started doing these back in 2016. And this is our premier on-farm event that we do only one time a year, where it is a nuts to bolts breakdown of a scaled pasture pork operation and enterprise, how we do things in the field. It's about half of the school is actually out in the field, half is in the classroom. And then it's a 3-day event. The last day is the most important one. That's the marketing side. You can produce a fabulous product, but if you don't have a methodology for marketing, that product, then you just got a lot of pork in your freezer. So we try to cover the totality of everything, that it's a lot more than just having some cute pigs in the woods. It's about the infrastructure behind that, about doing things with efficiency and then moving things to the processor and getting it sold to the customer. So what we wanted to create was, the most realistic production school out there for pastured pigs. And it's something that we're pretty proud of. This year, we've got 2 guests coming. It's the first time we've had guest instructors, which will be awesome. 2 guys that I really admire and look up to. We have Jeff Maddox, who's the president of Fertrell. They are a national company out of Pennsylvania that produces some of the highest end minerals and supplementation that's out there. We use their products in our feed. He's super knowledgeable on management and feed formulations. And then we have Greg Gunthorpe, who is a 4th generation hog guy from Indiana. Really fascinating story with his family, how they went from having pigs on pasture to getting into that craze of putting them all in the barn in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that completely falling apart. And him, his generation kind of restarting the operation into a pasture-based operation, having their own on-farm USDA facility. So they're taking it all the way through, and they service a lot of wholesale markets. They don't do retail, but his knowledge and expertise on pigs and processing and regulation and dealing with the USDA is unsurpassed. So really looking forward to having these 2 guys coming out this year. And it's going to be 3 action-packed days here in the early fall.
Yeah, September 30th through October 2nd, and you can find more information about that at farmbuild.us. We'll put the link to the event in the description as well. Anything else you're working on, or any other places people should find you?
Always got a lot of things, in the mix. So, certainly can keep up with anything that's going on. Just look up Farm Builder on any of the social platforms. I caused a little stir recently by posting a 8-second clip of what sows in a gestation farm looked like and contrasted it with sows on pasture, and that stirred up a lot of, let's say, impassioned comments. So you never know what'll pop off.
Positive or negative towards you?
Both. I mean, there was a lot of positive. I actually ended up doing an interview with basically an animal rights group called me up on it, and they wanted to do a Zoom interview on humane animal treatment, which was interesting, and a lot of negative comments from commodity guys. I mean, farmers love criticizing their own, and not that what I did was critical. It just contrasted. I was like, hey, here's what sows in a barn look like. Here's what sows on pasture look like. And they got kind of upset about that.
What is the commodity hog market going to look like this year with tariffs and everything that's going on?
Oh, they're losing their butts. Yeah. It's going to be another down year for pigs at the commodity level.
Yeah. All right, Jordan. Well, it's always great talking to you, and we will see you soon. Plan on having Jordan back to the EcoEg conference this year, and we will probably be out for his Fair to Finish school too. So looking forward to doing some more work with Jordan.
Looks great, dude. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.